Hey folks, David Stewart here. Time for some more Storycraft, this time talking more specifically about prose writing and something that you can do when you're writing a book versus, say, making a movie or a comic, and that is creating a multi-sensory experience. That is giving the reader more than just the visual space. I've had Brian Niemeyer on the channel many times, and one of the things he talks about is head movies. This is something that writers who are a little new to the craft tend to do because they haven't really focused on doing lots of other senses, and maybe they watch a lot of movies. So they have what would be a movie that they're describing. They're describing all the visuals of what's happening in a space rather than bringing in any kind of extra senses to enhance that feeling. When you're writing in prose, you have a distinct advantage over the visual space in that you can describe something and people will imagine it. And that doesn't just include the visuals. You can describe the visuals, the way somebody looks, the way a room looks, but you also can describe the way something smells, the way something sounds, what the quiet area sounds like, what a car sounds like. You can describe how things feel, what their texture's like, not just feeling, but like hot and cold, which are kind of beyond the sense of touch. Like you can describe you're getting goosebumps and the hair on your arm standing up. You can describe the smell and taste of things. You can describe bad smells or good smells. And I used a lot of these things in this new book, Afterglow Generation Y, because a lot of our nostalgic feelings, a lot of our memories are tied to senses other than sight and other than hearing even, but especially smell, touch. There's lots of feelings that evoke nostalgia that don't have to do with a visual space at all. The sound of rain. So I use the sound of rain. It's raining in a lot of the stories. I use the feeling of the air conditioner blowing on your hot skin, blowing on your sweat, and it dries and gets salty. There's the smell of things. One smell to me that's very particularly nostalgic, which I think I mentioned briefly in one of the stories here, is the smell of electronics when they're new. I remember distinctly opening a Super Nintendo the year it came out. My dad bought it for us. We were so excited that we got it for Christmas. It was such a cool Christmas morning because we got a new console like when it came out. That was the Super Nintendo, and I remember the smell of the plastic so distinctly that every time I smell something similar to that, because people still use similar plastics that vent that same smell, it's like boom, it's like I'm back in 1991 or whenever we got the Super Nintendo. I think it was 1991. It's like I'm back there. Maybe it was 1992. Anyway, I'm back in like that year, opening the Super Nintendo on Christmas and smelling it and like getting that full sense of what this thing was and how cool it was to have it and how much fun it was to plug it in and play it, and the sounds of it and just the feeling of everything associated with that particular Christmas. There's other smells that people associate with Christmas, like the smell of pine trees, like the smell of a Christmas tree, and maybe the smell of cookies baking, and maybe the smell of vanilla, right? I've heard this, and in fact, I've had experience with this, people wearing or women wearing vanilla scented perfume. Why would you wear vanilla scented perfume? Well, because people have a lot of good memory associations with vanilla. So if you get vanilla scented perfume, well, the man is going to get hungry smelling that vanilla. And maybe you can give him something to eat. Might have some cookies for him. But more importantly, he's going to remember all the good things that go with vanilla, which is going to be almost universally good memories, things like cake and ice cream. So you are immediately tapping into that sense of smell to evoke a memory. It smells very powerful. So when you're writing, you can use smell a lot as well. And bad smells too. I have many memories of bad smells. Things that smell like rotten fruit, like ripe fruit, things that smell really bad, like something's dead. For me, one smell memory I have that's bad is one of my very first real jobs was at a chicken plant, a chicken slaughterhouse, and it smelled terrible. But there's a very specific smell to it. It doesn't smell like poop. It doesn't smell like death. It smells like this congealed, condensed chicken blood that's this machine would like spit into this dumpster. Really weird. I think they turned it into dog food because there was still protein and stuff in it. But it smelled terrible. But I can smell it. Anytime I smell it, it's like, boom, I know what that is, and it's like I'm back. It's like I'm back working that job again. And one of my last teaching jobs, you could smell the chicken plant on the window, like, man, there's a chicken plant out there, isn't there? You can smell it. oh, it smells awful. Or the smell of raisins. They used to roll the raisins behind my high school every fall. So whenever I smell that kind of rotten smell of drying raisins, it takes me back to like dusty fall band practice and stuff like that. All of these tapping into memory ideas. I have a lot of these in this book because a lot of it is about nostalgia. It's about taking you back or people remembering things from the past. And so those extra senses are really important. The sound of rain, the smell of this and that, the feeling of the air conditioner. Those are all things that you can incorporate into your writing. So whenever a character enters a room, there's a visual space to the room. The room is arranged a certain way. Maybe there's a smell to the room. There's almost always a smell to like somebody's house. Maybe it smells like cats, or it smells like, maybe it smells like horses because the guy's a cowboy and he has like his hat on the wall or something, right? There's a smell to horses. There's a smell of a dairy. Everything has a smell associated with it, and there's often sounds. There's like the whining AC, There's the sound of horses galloping. There's the sound of footsteps echoing down a hallway. There's the sound of like dog nails clopping on the ground as a dog comes running down the hallway. There's the sounds of a creaking wagon. These are all things that you need to bring into your writing in order to create that full multisensory experience that you get with a book by imagining those sounds rather than an audiovisual space like a movie where you can only hear and see things, and it's very difficult to communicate smell information without a character simply saying, that smells bad. Do you smell that? I smell this. So one of the ways that you can get around this in movies, the fact that you don't have prose to describe something, is you can have the characters describe it. Super Tide, did you ever feel such a breeze? Blows in the north of every man's heart, So Conan has this wistful, nostalgic experience of like this, the sound, this breeze blowing. And so that's a feeling that John Milius has in a movie by having a character talk about the feeling rather than just having a prose or a narrator describe the feeling. You have a character talk about the feeling. That's the way that you can tap into the power of the book a little bit in the visual space, is you put it in there as dialogue. The character reminisces and talks about the feeling rather than you describing it, because all you really have is the visual space, but you still have the ability to say words through the characters in a movie, or if you really have to, through a narrator. Those are all good storytelling techniques. I use a lot of them in here, and I use an additional one that's extra hypnotic. So there was a great thread on Twitter the other day by ghostwriter Joshua Lysek, who's also a hypnotist like Scott Adams, and it's how to evoke a hypnotic effect in your writing. Because a hypnosis is a multisensory experience. You're giving somebody like a new memory, and that's going to include all these extra senses. That makes it more real because we have all these senses that we're feeling all the time. The feeling of time, our arrangement of our body up and down, sight, smell, taste. All of those are important for creating that sense of calm or a sense of tension. I do this in this book by writing things in the second person, which is something I almost never do for regular storytelling. But the very first thing, it's like you walk steadily away from the chaos. You are doing it. So if you take the audience and you say, you are feeling this, you are doing this, you are experiencing this. It's you that smells this. It's you that feels this. It's you that's touching this. It's you that's thinking this. Even though that doesn't make any sense, like obviously you are not doing this story at all. But it has that hypnotic effect. It brings the person in to the perspective of the storyteller in a way that it's like creating a hypnotic memory. She'd be called average, or perhaps that might be slightly generous. You know this, and yet to you, she is beautiful, even captivating. So you're not experiencing this. You're not you, right? But it makes you visualize it from your own eyes, and it makes you smell it with your own nose rather than having a stand-in that's a third person character who's doing the things besides you. It's like you're watching that third person character do it. And instead, it's you doing it. It's you experiencing. It's you feeling all of those things. So that's an extra technique you can use. I don't usually recommend writing a lot of fiction in the second person. I did it for this one specifically for those reasons, because it creates an extra hypnotic effect. And in fact, most books, if they were written entirely in the second person, I'd probably not want to read them. But this one just has some of the stories in second person for that nostalgic effect, for that enhanced feeling of you are really doing that. You are really experiencing these sensory elements. So anyway, incorporate that stuff into your writing. More senses than just the visual and more than just the audio. You should have sight, sound, smell especially, and touch, feelings of cold, and all of those sorts of things. Anything that evokes those feelings is going to enhance the quality of your prose writing significantly. So anyway, buy the new book. It's called Afterglow Generation Y. Buy the other new book, Al Shafalva, which is a fantasy tragedy. And I'll see you guys next time.